Hey guys, it's Jay, here with another review video. Before the review begins, I'd like to ask if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and share with others. Without further ado, on to the vid. To start the video off, this episode should imply the one we have been referring to as the child Gakki is actually the Reaper Gakki. And this title comes from the list of Gakki titles Brent has given us in the past, with the titles lining up with the other characters as well. This episode provides two distinct pieces of evidence that would suggest the child is the Reaper Gakki. The first is the name of the technique he uses, with that being Blood Monarch's art, Blood Reaper Sickle. I'll look at the technique a little bit later, but the fifth word is what emphasizes the child being the Reaper Gakki, as he's using a technique with the term Reaper in it. The next piece of evidence comes soon after the previous one, as the child directly refers to himself as the Grim Reaper. The only time we have seen something like this is when the Beast Gakki refers to himself as such when introducing himself to Minamoto in episode 91. And while the technique he was going to use in episode 99 isn't as direct as the one the child uses, the term's primal shift would suggest he is the Beast Gakki as well. With the child revealing himself as the Reaper Gakki, we now know of 8 of the 11 Gakki from the list. Going in order of that list, we have Goro, who is the Iron Gakki, with his talent directly relating to iron manipulation. The child, who has identified himself as the Grim Reaper, aka the Reaper Gakki, who we also see use a scythe even in season 2, which only adds to his title. The Beast Gakki, who introduced himself to Minamoto in episode 91 and used a clan-related shift technique that would suggest he is a beast in his own right. Roberto, the Fox Gakki, and we know it's him as at the end of season 2, he was directly going to use his nine-tailed fox transformation, and we see that transformation this season in episode 144 and 145. Ariel, the Faces Gakki, with her talent directly having to do with different facial expressions. The Poison Gakki, who we can guess is Meladan, who shows up in episode 112, with his design encompassing a half-face respirator mask, which is used to protect against hazardous airborne containments such as toxic gases. The Corrosion Gakki, who was identified by Kaguya as such in episode 110, and his talent has a melting decay effect, which resulted in Gary losing vision in his left eye and a handprint scar remaining on his face. And lastly, the Strength Gakki, who we know is Konos, as his name and title were shown in episode 99. This leaves us with 3 unidentified Gakki, though with only 3 remaining, we can make some guesses as to who is who. The characters' visages match the Gakki we have seen already, as Berto in the bottom right has his middle arm, and Meladan on the left has a tube that extends from his mask. This means we can eliminate most characters from this image, and just for clarification, that would be Iron at the very bottom, Reaper and Strength at the top, Corrosion to the left, Beast to the right, Faces and Fox at the bottom right, as well as Poison on the left. Looking at the 3 remaining, the current theories would suggest the one on the top right is the Puppet Gakki, as the smaller visage at the top of the chair could be a creation the Gakki controls. The one on the top in the middle left has been guessed to be the Sand Gakki, and this is due to the somewhat resemblance of a Prince of Persia type of look that Brent mentioned during a past Q&A. This only leaves 1 remaining, with the only title left being that of the Death Gakki. Keeping the entirety of the Gakki in focus, the child mentions that they all said the Gakki were equal to the God tier. This statement forces us to reevaluate how strong the Gakki actually are. Brent said in the past that a Gakki was a God tier with more chi.
Will we ever get a scene where it's just some of the hands facing against a Gakki or 2?
So the Gakki are supposed to challenge each one of the god tier individually, but remember the god tier have their hand with them, so it will be like a god tier plus hand versus a Gakki, because the Gakki is like a god tier with more chi, because remember they are god tier level Kimyos that have chi, their chi level increased or removed, the limit removed because of Vow. So they're supposed to be like a good match for a god tier and a hand together.
We also learned during this season from Ilios in episode 127 that Chi's purpose is to strengthen a talent, which implies the more Chi you have, the stronger your talent is. This also coincides with the God tier being the top 10 strongest Kimyos, as they have reached their talent's limit, which means they possess the max amount of Chi a Kimyo can have, but that is still up to their individual talents and any added talent weapons. As Brent confirmed, Venter's Chi helped Bjorn reach the level of God tier. I say all this to say that, by virtue of having more Chi than the God tier, the Gakki should be stronger than them, or at the very least be able to produce more powerful attacks through having more Chi to pour into them. A way to make the Reaper Gakki statement make a bit more sense is if we say while the Gakki should have larger Chi pools than the God tier through the boost they acquired from Veil's blood, their talents haven't outright surpassed that of the God tiers, so they actually have similar levels of Chi. There's no way to confirm or deny this though, as we aren't aware of how long the Gakki have actually existed, meaning we don't know how old they are or how long they've been training to be members of the anti-God tier. Some of the older members could have chi that surpasses the god tier, while some of the younger members are only equal to them. And the reason I'm using age as a kind of metric is due to how age and experience play into a Kimyo's strength, as the god tier themselves are older Kimyos, with the youngest likely being in their 40s, while we are aware of Minamoto and Kevin being in their 80s. And these men have had quite some time to master and reach the pinnacles of their talents, so a member of the Gakki who is closer to them in age would have the same principle applied to them, while also having an extended chi limit for added growth, and a new overall max they have achieved, while a younger member who is a bit further from them in age would have the same chi limit extension, but hasn't quite reached their new defined max. Now we can apply this logic to the rest of the Gakki, but the Reaper believes he and Konos have no equal. The reason this makes sense in regards to Konos is due to it being revealed that he is the first living talent, who also killed the parents of the Great Four. This means that Konos is as old as the Adamos brothers, and potentially stronger than them as well. This also means he's an autonomous living talent like the twins Ai and Rai, which means he is a living entity of chi whose talent cannot reside in a Kimyo. This should imply it may not be possible for Veal to have given him a chi limit boost, as there may not be a way to provide blood to a being like Konos. This would then mean that Konos' strength comes entirely from himself with no added buffs, though you can also interpret the Reaper Gakki statement last episode as being one that means Veal still found a way to increase Konos' chi limit, and this would outright make him one of the strongest characters in the series. Moving on to the Reaper Gakki, his claim of having no equal is quite interesting, as he is the youngest of the Gakki, and I think part of his confidence comes from another statement, where he says we are the perfect sons of Lord Vegizatha. The Gakki are seen as Veal's children, so it's possible that while Konos is a perfected experiment, the Reaper is more akin to Veal having an actual child of his own. In episode 143, Abijah mentions the concept of Shay being Leo's son by inheritance, and Veal's talent means kin by blood, which is shown in episode 97. The Reaper also has the only other blood talent we have seen, so it may be possible that as much as he sees the Gakki as tools, he also sees the Reaper as a son and one he can pass his knowledge of the blood arts to. This would lead to the child being far stronger and far more skilled than one would expect, and adds to the reason why he can keep up with the likes of Abijah in episode 98. Keeping with the idea of Veal passing on his knowledge of the blood arts to the Reaper Gakki, let's look at the abilities he displays as well as his talent overall. Now I want to give a quick shout out to Wolf Nara aka Code Archives, as in his past Child Gakki video, he mentions how he congeals and coagulates his blood, and this premise is what I'll be using to explain how his talent seems to operate. First, the Reaper Gakki has been shown to form blood clots at his hands. Blood clots normally only form when a blood vessel is injured, such as if there is a cut to the skin, with the blood thickening and forming a semi-solid mass at the site of the cut to stop the bleeding. However, the Reaper Gakki is forming these blood clots with no prior injury, which means he is forming a specific type of blood clot at his hands known as a superficial blood clot. These types of blood clots occur in a vein near the skin, and while they are painful, they are usually not serious. This description, along with how the Reaper's blood has been shown to protrude from his hands, coincides with what Andrea says about Kinesis talents in episode 123, as she notes that they tend to be painful. This should naturally make the Reaper Gakki's talent a Kinesis type. Going back to superficial blood clots, they form a visible, red, warm, and tender cord-like vein just under the skin. This is essentially what occurs when he activates his talent, with the clots also forming as red bubbles on his hands. He then innately uses the process of congealing, which means to change from a fluid state to a solid state, by or as if by cold. And this is essentially what allows him to manipulate the shape of his blood and create these solid weapons he does. With all of that understood, let's actually look at what the Reaper Gakki has been shown to do with his blood. His most signature technique is forming a large scythe of pure blood. He can increase the size of this scythe after it is made, as he does so against Abijah, with this likely increasing its overall attack potency. In this episode, he performs a technique with the scythe, known as Blood Monarch's art, Blood Reaper Sickle, which from the scythe sends out multiple sickle-shaped slashes of blood. The name of this technique can suggest this was something the Reaper learned directly from Veal, and he may have many other techniques that came from his teaching as well. He can also form smaller scythes that he uses like shuriken. He uses another projectile in this episode, with him forming a sort of blood needle and throwing it like a kunai knife. Though unlike the shuriken scythe that has a fully solid form, this kunai needle when destroyed splits into smaller blood needles, keeping their original trajectory, as he's likely controlling the blood even after it has left his body. In my opinion, this is something the Reaper Gakki thought of after fighting Abijah, as his original scythe shuriken was was easily deflected by Abijah, so he may have wanted to figure out a way to ensure something like that doesn't always occur. I think his condescending statement towards Sonya after she attempts to stop it adds to this point as well. The last thing we have seen him do is form a blood needle line, where he forms a blood needle in his hand and extends it in a straight line at his opponent. Now we can focus our attention on Lord Kofi Akin. His talent is known as Tyson and is a power type. Mycoglycerin tenacious, aka Tyson, is a substance that flows through the veins of Lord Kofi Akin. When heated, this radioactive and highly combustible substance releases large volumes of gas within Kofi's bloodstream. This creates explosive movements that double their potency on contact. There is no limit to how hot Tyson can get. The longer Lord Kofi remains engaged in combat, the more powerful he grows. I did explain Kofi's talent in my episode 152 review, and most of what I said was quite accurate. But with access to the full description, let's get a more accurate gauge on his talent's function. We now know why Sonya called the Tyson substance volatile, as it's radioactive and highly combustible, and intense movement is what causes said combustion, with the combustion being part of the reason Kofi is hot, but the main reason being the Tyson substance growing in heat in response to Kofi's movements. When the substance has combusted, the gas it produces flows through Kofi's bloodstream, and this is likely what is causing the red effect we see on Kofi's body. The reason the gas creates explosive movements relates to what I said about pressure buildup in my episode 152 review, as compressing a gas forces the molecules to move faster, and since the gas is flowing throughout the entirety of Kofi's bloodstream, it has no place else to go. It would slowly be compressed inside his bloodstream, thus increasing the gas molecule's kinetic energy. This would in turn cause Kofi himself to move faster in a burst, which is what he does when he turns around after Sonya's warning. Now, in regards to it doubling in potency, the definition of potent is having or wielding force, authority, or influence. And translating this to Kofi means the force of his movements is what's doubling. The reason it says on contact is that contact is likely a trigger of the Tyson substance to produce more heat and gas in a similar manner to how friction produces heat. This is how the train got him to the level of power he is at right now, as he was being ping-ponged around inside, slamming against the walls, which forced Tyson to combust each time he made contact, increasing his level of heat and the gas that's flowing through his bloodstream. This should mean that any successful punch Kofi lands only helps build up his next attack's force. We see this in the episode as Kofi's first punch after exiting the train sends Konos back, and the one following that takes Konos' head off. It should also be noted that not all of Kofi's hits destroy Konos' body, as we see this with the 2 quick hits he lands. This could imply Kofi is holding back the power of his punches with the express purpose of increasing his talent's power, and is also choosing when to deal heavier blows. And just so we are clear, the Tyson substance does not become the gas, it produces it, and this is why Kofi can grow more powerful. His talent will get hotter and keep producing gas as a result. Now that we've broken down his talent, let's take a brief look at Kofi's fighting style. Since Kofi's talent very clearly pulls from the famous Mike Tyson, it only makes sense that Kofi has a boxing-oriented style. This is really emphasized in how he keeps his hands up nearly the entire time, and when striking, he almost always has the opposite hand near his cheek, which is supposed to help protect his face. He also seems to have a tendency to throw strong hooks or haymaker punches, which for him serve the purpose of creating space between him and his opponent, and he does this to Konos twice in this episode. It should also be noted that while Kofi does not dodge often, when he does, it is still in line with his combat style. When Konos attempts to kick him, Kofi keeps his hands up and does a quick short step to the side, and when Konos attempts to grab him, Kofi moves out of the way by pivoting on his left foot. This is then the same foot he keeps on the ground and turns on. And while not a part of any boxing style, Kofi does seem to know of throw moves, as he uses one against Konos. To end this off, one thing I like about this episode is that when Kofi enters the battle, everyone has a nervous expression, with Sonya's face having a look that reflects anticipation more than anything. I also like that the nervous look of the Reaper and Konos doesn't last, with Konos being excited and the Reaper being confident, and this shows how they are both aware that Kofi is stronger than Sonya and are okay with that for their own reasons. I'd also like to point out that Kofi makes the same mention of haste that Sonya did in the last episode, which could further show that Konos has a haste talent. Another thing I noticed is that Kofi still has the bag around his waist, and I'm wondering what he keeps inside it. The only things I could think of is something that drastically amps his talent's function by way of helping increase the heat in his body, or something that he can take to rapidly cool Tyson down as opposed to him waiting for it to cool on its own. he could also technically have something that does both. I really like that this episode offers new information via the Reaper Gakki, and that's part of where this series thrives in my opinion, as it's just as fun connecting the dots of the story as it is to reading through the fights and action scenes. And lastly, I'd like to put a spotlight on Acidic Octopus, who questions if Veil has done something similar to Rokash, but with the Reaper Gakki. Now, this is something I mentioned months ago in my episode 117 review, which I highly recommend you check out after this one for my initial thoughts on the subject. Looking at another one of his comments, he also outlines the difference between what Leo did versus what Rokash did when it comes to sharing power. Where Leo gave all of the aspects of Ilios to Andrea, just less overall power, but Rokash gave Cass a specific aspect of his talent, but kept its main functions for himself, with him also noting that Veil has to spill his blood to control it, while the Reaper can freely control his. And he uses this as a way to sort of suggest that Veil has done a similar talent transfer to Rokash. Now, this is an interesting comment to look at in my opinion, as Veil nearly every time we see him is depicted having to wound himself to control his blood and use it. However, it's also implied by him and his talent description that he can control the blood of others. It hasn't ever really been depicted that Veil can freely control the blood of his body in the same manner the Reaper has, and the only time you could make that assumption would be when he's a child, but it's also possible the Dothanil arm he made was formed by the blood of the man he killed. So to answer the overall question, it's still undeterminable if the Reaper Gakki's blood talent has any connection to Dothanil, or if it is its own unique talent with connections to Sabito and Hisame that Code Archives points out in his theory video. But anyway, that's the video guys. Let me know what your favorite part of the chapter was in the comments below, as well as how you feel about the things I mentioned throughout the video. Don't forget to read the actual episode for yourself, and be sure to like it as well. And I will see y'all in the next one.